customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. This week, we welcome back guest host Dave Murray, Senior Customer Experience Consultant for the DiJulius Group, as he discusses how to build a culture that attracts and keeps the best talent. This week, you'll learn what's causing the Great Resignation era, how to solve the work-from-home quandary, how to eliminate poor performers, and how to build a culture employees love. Now here's your host for this week's podcast, Dave Murray.
I'm going to be talking about the topic of actually training our leaders to lead, creating that culture that we want to have within our organization. And it surprises me sometimes that how often organizations don't feel they need this. And so I'm going to share some slides with you today that hopefully helps you make the case internally that you do need this. So you can go back and take some of these tools and implement them in your organization to create better leaders and to create a better culture. So let's get started. The reason that we're even looking at this as a topic is because the reality is most organizations don't have training on how to lead within the culture that they want to create. The reality is you get promoted and there isn't a manual on what to do next. So what does that mean? What does that mean to organizations? What does that mean to our team members? The reality is people get promoted for several reasons. They're valid reasons. Maybe it's because Donnie's our best salesperson, so we really need to give him a sales team to keep him here. Or Mary just finished her MBA, so now we have to promote her. Or Michael's been here for 5 years, and if we don't give him a team, we're worried he may leave us. So those are good reasons to promote people, but they're not the only reason. And that's where organizations make so many mistakes. They promote people based on their productivity, what they've done when they were actually doing the job, but they've never trained them or shown them how to be a leader within the organization. Organizations make assumptions that people naturally know how to do that. The reality is they don't. They may have some strengths, they may have some weaknesses, and we learned that we need to give them a roadmap to really be the leader that we'd like them to be. One of the biggest questions is, does the person even want to lead? Do they want to lead others? The reality in a lot of organizations is to become a manager, that's how you get a promotion. That's how you get a raise, is to take on a team, to lead others. And a lot of times it might be the only means to do that. But does that person even really want that role? I think one of the best examples is in the sales world, right? There's a lot of sales managers out there that would much rather just be selling if they had the opportunity. And maybe this happened in your organization. Maybe you can think of one or two of these where you had a rock star come into the organization. They were fantastic. You were so excited about them. And so they got promoted pretty quickly. And all of a sudden it started to fizzle, and maybe they weren't as engaged and they weren't bought in. And all of a sudden you turned a rock star into a detractor. And before you know it, they're not even with the organization anymore. Unfortunately, that plays out in organizations time and time again. But the good news is we know the reason why, and we're going to help you stop that from happening in the future. And one of the reasons that this is such an issue is organizations typically don't understand how important that middle layer of management truly is to the organization. So we as an organization at the DiJulius Group, we recently read the Challenger Sale and really enjoyed the book. And one thing that's I found really relevant from the book that I think is relevant for today's conversation is this quote from the authors of the Challenger Sale when they say, the manager is the fundamental link between strategy and execution. It's where initiatives live or die, right? If it doesn't live with the managers, any initiative is not going to survive. It's that simple. It's kind of that old adage that you may have heard before. If it's important to my manager, then it's important to me. If it's not, then it's not important to me, right? And organizations forget and get confused when they roll out a new initiative, and senior executives are excited and waiting to see the great results. And even frontline team members are thankful for this new tool and excited about this new opportunity, but then it fizzles and organizations say, why? I guess it wasn't the right fit. The reality was managers might have been the ones that rejected it. Maybe it was too much work. Maybe we put too much on their plate, took too much time, and didn't give them the tools necessary to really succeed with that initiative, with that program. So we need to be thinking that way, and we need to be recognizing their importance in our organization. So Google did a really interesting experiment a few years back. You might have heard of it. It was called Project Oxygen. They had a theory that middle layer managers were really just an extra layer of bureaucracy. They were slowing things down, getting in the way, and weren't productive. So they, as an organization, started an experiment where they were going as flat as possible. They literally got rid of several mid-level managers to become a flat organization. Well, here's the thing that's interesting to our conversation today that Google learned, and I have to give Google credit. They tried this experiment. The experiment failed, but what they did was they didn't just revert back to their old ways. They learned as much as they could from the experiment and then incorporated that into their business model. So here's what Google learned in Project Oxygen, and it was reported just recently in Inc. magazine of what came out of the study and what they learned. So again, they tried to flatten the organization, get rid of middle managers altogether. But what they found instead was what that caused the organization and what was missing from the organization. So in turn, it allowed them to create a list of 10 things that they found are crucial for managers to have. These are the 10 must-haves, according to Google, for a manager to be a good manager. So I'm going to share the list with you, and I want you to think right now, back in your organization, do your managers have these things? Do you have tools in place to train them to know how to do these things? Because 10's a lot, right? And you can make assumptions that a person has the ability to do 1, 2, 3 things, but assuming that they know how to do 10 is asking a lot of our team members. So the first one on the list is they have to be a good coach, right? They have to know how to coach others, but that's a learned skill. You have training in place to train new leaders, new supervisors on how to coach within the ranks, how to coach their teams. Another important trait that they learned was they need to have the ability to empower their teams, give them the autonomy. You can't have a micromanager. That's not going to work. So if micromanaging is in someone's personality, it may be something they have to be trained to do differently to be a successful manager. Managers have to create an inclusive environment, right? They can't play favorites. We all know that, but they have to make sure that that environment is as inclusive as possible for all team members to play a role. They have to be productive and results oriented. And probably that's one thing that many managers do bring to the table, especially if they've been promoted based on their previous production, right? They might be a good producer within the organization. So that one might be already there. That might be a little more inherent, but they also have to be a good communicator. They have to know how to cascade information to their teams, what to share, when to share it. And again, that may be something that needs to be trained. It is trainable, but you have to have that training in place. Continuing on with the remaining 5, they have to have a clear vision and strategy for the department and then be able to verbalize that to the team. They have to support career development of their team members, right? Now, I think this is one that gets missed very often in organizations, right? Someone becomes a new manager. They feel like their job is to drive results and hit the numbers and make sure everyone's being as productive as possible. But they don't realize that in order to achieve those goals, they need to be providing support for their team members on where they want to go next, where they want to go in their career, what their plans are going forward, right? If they don't have that, team members aren't going to stay, right? So do you have training in place to make sure that your managers understand how to do that and understand how important it is? They need to be an expert in the field and be able to advise their teams, right? They have to have that been there, done that mentality, right? So we need to make sure that they understand what the job is, they've done the job, and they can share and advise on the job. They need to be collaborative, right? They need to be able to pull their team together and work together, right? They can't work in a silo and go back and do the job themselves, again, maybe with that micromanaging mentality. And they need to be a strong decision maker. So if you have some managers in place right now that may waver a little bit when it comes to decision making, that might be a place to start. So these are the 10 things that Google find. Again, they were trying to get rid of managers altogether. And instead, what they found was we need managers and we need them to have these skills. So think about these skills in your organization. Do your managers have them? Do you have training on how to achieve these skills? So I'm going to share with you a tool that we use with our client base at the DiJulius Group to help create some training for many of the things on this list. Because the thing is, we have to remember that a lot of the things we're talking about here are trainable. We just need to give our team members a roadmap to do so. And if we're not giving our team members, our managers, that roadmap, what happens in an organization is something I like to call the manager lottery, right? You either win or lose the manager lottery. And we've all been there, right? We've all had a job where we loved our boss, we loved our manager, couldn't wait to go to work. Every day was exciting, new, and we were part of the team, felt appreciated, and couldn't wait to get there. We've also had jobs where it was kind of a drag. And maybe we felt underappreciated. Maybe we felt like our work was really going for nothing, right? And so that happens if we don't train our managers how to properly lead in this culture that we're creating. So when we work with a client in our consulting practice, what we're looking for is consistency. We're looking to create some consistent measures, consistent guidelines that our teams can follow externally with our customers. And in this case, we're looking to create some consistent standards that our leaders follow to deliver a consistent internal experience to our teams. And why is this so important? I love this fact. It's such an important piece of information. The single most important determinant in an individual's performance, so how well they're going to do with your organization, and their commitment to stay, how long they're going to stay with the organization. And we know those are two pretty important things, especially the job market we're in right now. So the single biggest determinant in how well they're going to perform and how long they're going to stay with us is the relationship they have with their immediate manager. Think about that for a minute. I always question, if it's so important, why don't more organizations look at this and utilize this as a strategy for longer tenured employees to make sure they're getting the most productivity they can be? But most organizations don't. So Bain & Company, the great research firm based in Boston, Massachusetts, did a study a few years ago, and they really looked at what drives employee engagement. What makes employees feel engaged? What makes them feel valued? And a couple of important things came out of that I'll share with you right now. So one of the things they realized from the study, they realized that if you're trying to change the level of engagement in your organization, you have to start at the supervisory level. You have to start with the managers, that mid-level. It's not the CEO coming out and making a fantastic speech that gets everyone amped up. That doesn't hurt, but it's not going to make the long-term change. Supervisors lead this change. They lead the long-term change. The other thing they found out was the importance of conducting regular check-ins with team members. So the example given is so many organizations do those large annual surveys. It may be 70 questions. It may take a team member 20 to 30 minutes to fill out. Very often they're asking themselves, who's going to read this? Is this going to change anything? Probably not. So the study found that doing more frequent, smaller check-ins is more valuable. But they also found out that not only can it be in the survey form, but it can also be in a one-on-one form, right? So it could just be a sit down. It could be a conversation. It could be a leader checking in on that team member, just having a conversation about work, but also things outside of work. So many of the clients that we work with when it comes to internal culture look at this as a big initiative, creating one-on-one meetings, creating the need for them, making sure that team members and leaders understand why they are doing them, and then rolling that out. But here's the thing that's really important to remember. You can't just tell leaders that, hey, we're going to start a one-on-one meeting requirement. So starting next Monday, start having one-on-ones. Right? If you do that, we know it's probably going to fail, or your one-on-ones are going to look so different from department to department to department. So we need to clarify what this looks like. So first, from the manager standpoint, we really have to give them the time to do these, right? Because if we're asking them to shoehorn this into their already busy day, we know it's going to fall off. We know it's not going to happen. So we have to create the time for them to do these things. We also have to give them the permission to do it, right? Give them the idea that it's part of their job function going forward, that this is important work that you have to be doing. And then, of course, we have to hold them accountable to actually doing it. So that's really, really important. Then the other point is, if we just go and ask our leaders to start huddling without giving them a roadmap and giving them the time, permission, and accountability, we also have to give them an idea of what that looks like. So here's a couple of examples from a few of our clients. Alpenhaus is a retailer in Western New York in the Albany area. They wanted to make sure that these one-on-ones were happening consistently and that managers were getting the same information and that managers weren't necessarily bogged down in just work things or just telling the team member what to do, but also asking the team member for their feedback. What's working well? How are you doing when it comes to your goals? Where can we be better? Right? Here's another example from ATI Physical Therapy, based just outside of Chicago, where they wanted to make sure that team members were focusing enough time on these. So they gave time, an idea of a time limit of what they should be talking about. They wanted to make sure that there was an informal catch-up. So the meeting wasn't just about work. How are things at home? What's new? How are the kids, et cetera, et cetera. And then talking about what concerns the employee may have had, then getting to the manager's notes and comments. And then very important on this, the last piece is, okay, we talked about these things. What's next? What do you have to do? What do I have to do to make sure we're moving towards these goals? So there was accountability built in to the last piece of this. The other thing that we have to remember about one-on-ones and holding these meetings is it's such a great time for leaders to learn about their employees with the goal of building better relationships. So it's not a quiz. It's not asking all sorts of questions. How many kids do you have? What do you like to do in your free time? But if you are actively listening as a manager, and you're taking notes and you're picking up this information from your team members, you are actually gathering information that you could be using to build a better relationship with follow-up questions. How was the soccer game last week? Where are you going on vacation this year? I know you went to Disney last year, whatever that is, right? But utilizing some of that personal information that you glean from these conversations. So not only do they help the employee really have clarity with career goals and hitting their job goals, but it also gives the manager an opportunity to learn more and build that better relationship. Here's another question I have for you in your organization. How would you rate communication right now? Usually when we work with any new client of ours, communication is always mentioned as an issue. There's either too much and I can't keep up. There's not enough. We're the last to know. We learn about sales on social media, whatever it is in your world, communication is always an issue. Well, here's the thing. Communication is also an issue for our team members. The predictive index, which some of you might be familiar with, some of you might use them as part of your HR initiatives. They did a study, and this was just about a month or two ago, and they found out that the number one employee complaint right now about managers, about their leaders, is communication, and usually lack thereof, right? So our team members are telling us they're not hearing enough. They're not knowledgeable enough about what's going on, that their leader is not giving them that information. So again, it kind of goes back to that time issue we talked about with holding one-on-ones and giving them the permission and the accountability. We have to make sure that our managers understand that this is an important initiative to share information, to cascade that information out, but also that we're giving them enough time to do it, right? Very often, managers are bogged down in tasks other than actually supporting their team members to get their jobs done. We have to remember the basic function of a manager is to support their teams to achieve success. And that support looks like a lot of different things, right? It is communicating with them. It's holding those one-on-one meetings. If we're not giving them enough time to do those things, we can't expect them to be successful. Okay, another question. How are crucial conversations being held in your organization? About 5 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and work with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department and focus on internal culture. And it was such a great experience. I have to tell you, though, my knowledge of police departments, I kind of expected, this was just my assumption going in, I kind of expected it that crucial conversations wouldn't be a problem, right? It's kind of a military type environment. And if someone did something wrong or needed some coaching, and I'm sure they would be made aware of it, right? That would be barked out at like an order, and that should be taken care of. I was surprised to learn that the Charlotte Police Department has issues with crucial conversations, just like any other organization would, right? They have issues, whether it's lack of time, right? The leader just didn't have the time to address it because other things were going on. Or maybe that critical conversation wasn't as high on the priority list of that leader to get to as we would have liked it to have been. And so it didn't quite get done. Or maybe they just weren't feeling comfortable with the fact that they were once one of their team members and now they are leading their team members, and they're just not comfortable holding that critical conversation. So what does that look like in your world? And do you have training in place to make sure that those things are addressed, that your team members, your managers are really knowledgeable and comfortable delivering these things? And how do you do when it comes to accountability? How are your leaders held accountable to some of your important strategies that you have in your organization? And let me give you a great example. So as I mentioned, we've had the chance to work with Playhouse Square in Cleveland, Ohio. They are a phenomenal organization. They are the largest theater district outside of New York City in North America. And they also have one of the largest season ticket holder bases of any theater district in North America. So they're really great at what they do. They're great at sales. They're great at service. One thing they uncovered, though, is they do have a little bit of an issue when it comes to their managers being held accountable. And let me give you an example. So they rolled out their nevers and always to their team members. And what they realized that their team members were excited about this tool. They were following this tool. They were bought into this tool, but they had some managers that weren't quite holding their team members accountable. They weren't coaching in the moment when someone didn't live up to an always or did something on our never list. Some were, but some weren't. They didn't have accountability across the board. So what the Playhouse Square did, and I love this quote from Renee Borner, their VP of Sales and Service, she realized that not only was this a great tool for their external or their front-facing team members, but it also helped them so much internally because it gave them a baseline to say to all leaders, hey, we all agreed to these. These are things that we feel are important to us. And so we need to hold our team members accountable. We need to do that consistently. So we need to teach ourselves. We need to learn how to coach in the moment when someone's not living up to the things on this list, because we all agreed how important these things are. So keep that in mind. Maybe you have some tools in place that aren't getting the traction that you would like. And that reason might be because your leaders aren't as good at being accountable to them as they could be. So an area of opportunity for you to ponder.
Interested in bringing John or the DiJulius Group team to work with your team? Message us today to schedule a keynote, workshop to create your own customer experience action statement, or a full consulting project. Email Claudia@thedijuliusgroup.com to get started.
So one of the things I shared at the Customer Service Revolution was the concept of a team experience playbook, a manual of these things that your leaders know what to follow. They know what to do. So kind of a playbook of the guidelines, if you will. So I gave an example from Mid-States Concrete, a client of ours for many, many years. It's done so many great things. So here's what theirs looks like. So I shared this at CS Rev, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of the behind the scenes of how you get here, how we help them create this. So this is an example of their internal culture, the standards they want their managers to follow at a critical point in someone's tenure with the organization, their first day, and how important that first impression can be, but also probably in many organizations, maybe yours, one of those things that doesn't always go so well, right? Sometimes balls get dropped. Sometimes a new employee walks in and the manager says, I didn't know you were starting today, right? Those things happen, right? So here's what Mid-States did. They created a checklist, if you will, for each person that was critical to making this happen correctly. So the manager has a checklist. You see, HR had a checklist and the marketing team had a checklist. And then there are experiential standards. So these are things that they know will help make a difference, help make a positive impact as long as they are executed consistently, right? So those are the things that have to happen consistently across the organization when a new employee is going through this particular standard. And then what are the above and beyond opportunities? Where can we go even further? Add that little extra when we have the opportunity. It's building awareness to our leaders, to our managers, that they can do these things. They have the permission. They can go ahead and do these things whenever they have the opportunity to do so. So here's the process. Here's how we get there. Okay, so what we do with our clients, we identify what are the top 5, what are the most important stages that you need to focus on. Maybe it's that first day, like I just showed you with mid-states. Maybe it's the talent acquisition process. Maybe it's onboarding, or maybe it's the first 90 days, like a probationary period, or maybe you realize that it's further down the road. We're losing people at 2 years, at 5 years. So maybe that needs to be your focus. Or maybe you need to really have a focus on having those one-on-ones and creating standards around what that looks like. So there's so many opportunities and so many different things you can focus on with this tool. Let me show you how it works. What we do is we identify those important stages, so those touch points that we want to drill down further on, and then we dissect them into 4 different buckets. The service defects, so what are those things that do go wrong if we're not careful? Operational standards, those are the things that probably are an SOP, hopefully are happening already. Maybe they're not, and sometimes we uncover that during this process. They might be great ideas that we thought were happening, but they're not. And a lot of times, like I said, those do exist in an SOP. Then we focus on experiential standards. And I'm going to define the difference between operational and experiential in just a minute here. But experiential are those things that are nice to do, nice to have. And I'll go deeper on that in just a second. And then, of course, above and beyond opportunities. Where can we go that little extra when the opportunity exists to really make this an impactful experience? Now, here's the thing. Every organization out there has the first 2 columns. Every organization has defects. They have things that go wrong. Every organization has operational standards. You can debate whether or not they're actually happening, but every organization has them. Most organizations don't have the last 2 columns, the experiential and the above and beyond. And that's why it's so important to spend some time on these things, because they help us build the culture and build the experience that we want to be delivering internally. So let's look at first day experience. I'm going to go a little deeper on the difference between operational and experiential, just so everyone has a good understanding of that. So let's go a little deeper on the first day experience that I shared with Mid-States Concrete. So here's an operational experience. Here's what it typically looks like, right? You come in, you have to do the HR paperwork. You have to get in touch with IT, and they have to make sure you have your login and learn how to do all those things. You meet with your supervisor at some point, and they kind of give you the lay of the land. You get some hard skill training, like what the job actually entails, how to answer the phones, how to use the CRM system, et cetera. And then you probably get a tour of the office, right? So those are basic operational that happen in most places out there. But what if it was a little different? What if we had some experiential, like the manager was there first thing to welcome you, right? That was their biggest priority of the day. Maybe you had a meet and greet with the team so they could help make you feel welcome. It's always such an awkward time, and sometimes people have a hard time adapting to a new team. How do we make that easier for them? Maybe we do a soft skill overview, make sure they understand what we're about as an organization, how we treat our customers, share tools like our nevers and always list or other tools that we may have that are more customer centric. And maybe there's a handwritten note that comes from the team that we give to them as a welcome. And maybe if there's time, we go to a team lunch, right? So those are the experiential. Those are the things that make it more of an experience, a better experience, if we take the time to focus on them. So again, quick overview. Operational is more of the service portion, the things that we have to do to get the job done. I have to get your I-9, the other HR paperwork in order to allow you to be an employee. So we have to execute it in order to get the job done. Everyone else does it too, so it doesn't set us apart. And with operational, the only time they're noticeable is when they don't happen, right? The only time they're noticeable is when we drop the ball and they are missing. Conversely, when you talk about experiential standards, the great thing about them is we don't have to do them to get the job done, right? They are nice add-ons, but don't have to be there to execute the actual job. It can be a wow moment for that team member. And it's the reason why employees stay. It starts to build that brand equity with the organization. It makes employees feel valued. It makes employees feel special. It leads them to becoming brand evangelists. And of course, it's not delivered by the majority of our competitors, if any of our competitors, right? It really helps us stand apart from our competition out there. So one more quick idea I want to share with you all about some of your positions. I had a great conversation with a client of ours at Colton RV, and they were struggling with a very important position in their organization. It was a service advisor position. So this is kind of the conduit, if you will, between the customer and getting service done on their vehicles. Colton RV is in Western New York in the Buffalo area, and they're a leading seller of RVs and other camping equipment. So they were having an issue maintaining this position of service advisor. And this is such an important role because they were the person that was having those conversations with the customer, learning what was wrong with the vehicle, what needed to happen, imparting that information back to service, and also doing the follow-up information. So I was having a conversation with the leaders of Colton, and it went something like this. They shared with me that when they hired someone, the person was usually a go-getter. They were finding these great people. The first 6 to 8 months, they were going above and beyond. They were really engaged both externally and with the internal team. But then something would happen. When they got to about 9 months to a year, that would start to fizzle. They wouldn't be as engaged. Things would be a little different. And then by the time they got to 18 months, that person was usually gone. And they kept saying it was happening over and over and over. And they asked themselves, why can't we find people that stick? What is wrong with these people that we are finding that do this job so well for 8 to 9 months and then just disappear on us? And they had a bit of an epiphany when they realized maybe it's not the people, maybe it's the position, right? So think about it this way. If you have positions where you're having trouble staffing, look at those positions and ask yourself, are we giving our team members the right amount of support to do these jobs? Sometimes team members are in jobs where they're getting overwhelmed with information. They're dealing with a lot of customers, maybe a lot of upset customers. Ask yourself as an organization, are we doing enough to support those team members so that they can thrive? They can maintain that great attitude, that great ability they brought early on and carry that through their entire tenure with us. So that might be an area you want to go back and start to look at within your organization. The last thing I want to share with you all is this important piece of information. Perks do not equal culture, right? Having foosball and ping pong and lunch brought in on Wednesdays are all great things, and they contribute to the culture, but they don't replace and create your culture solely, right? They are nice to haves, but they are not going to do them to create your culture on their own. That was a mistake a lot of organizations made back about 10 years ago or so, where they kind of hitched their wagon to that and hope that these things would create the culture for them. And they soon realized that they did not. Again, they're nice to have. They're nice for your employees to be able to enjoy and blow off some steam, but they are not going to create your culture for you. You need your leaders, your managers, your supervisors to do that. And again, a reminder, the single most important determinant of an individual's performance in our organization and their commitment to stay with us is the relationship that they have with their immediate manager. So I say, let's start there. Let's focus there.
We love to read your reviews. Please be sure to share your comments and let us know what you're enjoying most on the podcast. And to hear more episodes, be sure to subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening and being part of the customer service revolution.